Hello, and welcome to the Autism Recovery Summit for Healing Brain, Body, and Being. I'm your host and autism recovery specialist, Luminara Sirdar. I want to make sure you have the opportunity to watch all our summit interviews because, as you'll see today, each one has its own little pieces of wisdom and gems of knowledge that you can really implement for your kids today or in a week or in a month. And so if you can't catch all the interviews, we do have a package where you can purchase them and you get a lot of great bonuses, and it's a special price during the summit. So you can check that out. I would like to move on to introduce our speaker today. And we have Dr. Jared Skowron. He is a naturopathic physician. He's been in practice for almost 17 years, working exclusively with children using natural medicine instead of pharmaceuticals. He's an international expert on the biomedical treatment of autism and ADHD. He's an international speaker, MAPS doctor, author, and owner of Spectrum Awakening, which is a supplement company. He'll be talking about that. And he'll be talking today about the top 5 natural supplements to help improve speech. Welcome, Dr. Skowron.
Hi, Luminara. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always great to have you on because you're so full of wisdom and you have so much experience with these kids. So let's get started. And we're going to talk about speech. So tell us, why is that such a struggle in kids on the spectrum?
So, whenever I talk to families and talk to parents, and like you said, boy, the past 17 years have flown by, and I've worked with so many thousands of families working with their kids and working towards recovery with all of them. And, every time I talk to a family, I ask them, what are your big goals? What do we really want for our kids? And one of the biggest things in the here and now is always language. Okay, and language is so important for a few reasons. Language is so important just as a parent. I mean, I've got a daughter myself. You want to know if they're happy. You want to know if they're sad. You want to know if they're in pain. And we need to be able to communicate these things. So obviously language is so important just to understand where your child's at. The next part obviously is school, because our society judges how smart you are on what comes out of this hole. Okay, whatever comes out of this hole, that's how smart you are. And you've got a child who's not age appropriate in their language, and then all of a sudden the school systems and people may think, geez, boy, maybe this child isn't as smart. And what I really want to encourage all families is that language does not determine intelligence. Our kids are smart. They know what's going on. They know how to push your buttons. They know how to work you versus your husband versus your wife. And they know what's going on. But still they can't express it. And then they get to the point where they understand, they see everybody else talking and expressing their needs and their ideas. And then they understand that they can't do that. And that starts to make them angry. That starts to make them temperamental. And you get this behavioral snowball of, I want this, and I know I should be expressing it and talking it to get it, and I'm not getting it. And that just pisses me off. And then everything explodes. And this tends to be the day-to-day with all families. And man, it's a lot of stress. And I can't count the number of times I hear the phrase walking on eggshells.
Mm-hmm.
We're all just like, oh my gosh, don't make them upset, because it's a lot to handle. So we really want to, and with all of our families, I want to do as much as possible to help get the words out, because then everybody's feeling happier and feeling better.
Absolutely. Wow, that was a lot. I understand the walking on eggshells and the desire for parents to have their children speak, and maybe you listening are like, yes, I want to know about this.
Right.
So I'm really glad you're talking about it. So how have you helped people speak more? What's your strategies?
So I wanted to break this down into 4 different parts. So these, we do a lot biomedically when we're talking about how do we help kids with autism. And my expertise is biomedical, which means we're treating autism as a medical condition. This is not a behavioral condition. They're not choosing to be this way. it's medical, and there is a lot of moving parts. And that's why, frankly, this is so complicated to treat, and why some treatments work for one person, they backfire with another kid, and this one works for them, and that one works for this one. And, you parents, you're online. You're trying to help your kids as much as possible. And you read like, oh, let's try this. Let's try the horseback. Let's try the stem cells. Let's try the B12 shots. Let's try the diets. And you see people where it's been massively successful with them, and you try it, and maybe it works for you, maybe it works a lot, maybe it works a little, maybe it doesn't work at all. And that gets frustrating because you want your kid better. And if it worked for one person, why isn't it working for mine? So there's a lot of moving parts in here, and there's 4 different things that I have seen work the best in my clinic and how I treat kids. So I'm here to kind of share those 4 things. And they're going to be diet, brain chemistry, inflammation, and detoxification. So let me kind of go in that order. And feel free, Luminara, if you want to jump in with any questions, make sure I'm explaining this well.
Sure, you're the expert.
Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes I get caught in my own head. So I'll briefly just talk about foods and such, because there is no one diet for everybody. You've heard of gluten-free and dairy-free and soy-free and GAPS and keto and paleo and the blood type diet. And there's so many different diets out there. No one person works well on each diet, okay? But what I want to encourage you is to try. If you haven't tried one of these elimination diets yet, you don't know if it's going to help, okay? And let me just give one example of a patient of mine from, years ago. This has got to be going back 12 years ago. He was a 3-year-old. He was nonverbal. We were talking to the parents about diet, and we agreed, let's try gluten-free first. Okay, it can be so daunting to change a child's diet in one day when they're so sensory, they're such picky eaters. We've had kids who just eat bacon. We've had kids who just eat pasta, and so it's a lot to say, hey, how am I going to stop feeding a kid when this is all they eat? So we can baby step, and that's okay. So with this family decided, hey, I want to try gluten-free. Great, let's try gluten-free. So going gluten-free in 1 month, he started talking. So we went from nonverbal to having some words and asking for what he wants. This is great. This is a great first step, and we're moving along. So, we did that for a couple months, and then Grandma and Grandpa had him, and they took him to McDonald's. And they said, oh, geez, what's gluten-free at McDonald's? Which, hey, awesome. Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. We're on board. And they said, hey, French fries. Those are potatoes. Potatoes don't have gluten. Let's have some French fries. Unfortunately, you go to a fast food restaurant, they've got a zillion chemicals in or on the foods to make them taste the way they taste. So the French fries have gluten in their coating, or at least they did 12 years ago when this patient had. So the child ate the French fries, and he stopped talking that day. Mm. And it took a whole nother month of going gluten-free to bring that language back. So if you want to try the diets, I really encourage you try them. You have to be 100% or it doesn't count. And if you slip up, and slip-ups are going to happen, you got to reset that clock back to 0 and try it again. Mm-hmm. So it's a long road, but I encourage everybody to at least try something and see how it works.
Right. And you think people can just do that on their own, or is there testing, or should they actually do something, work with a practitioner first?
That really depends on them. And excuse me, we've worked with a lot of families, and some families are very on top of food and nutrition, and they get it, and maybe they've got somebody in their family who's celiac or allergic to a different food, and they know it, and they're doing it, and they've got it down. And that's great. Do it on your own. Other people, you want assistance, work with a biomedical doc. We've got a nutritionist on our staff. She's been an ABA therapist for 10 years, and she really gets into the nitty-gritty. You can also do food testing. Now, there's different levels of food testing. There's food allergy testing, and there's food sensitivity testing, and they're different and they're independent. You should do both, but those tests are not 100% accurate in my opinion. And we've had people, like, as an example, we've had people who were tested for celiac and they're totally normal, but then they do the colonoscopy and they find out they actually do have celiac when they've done the biopsy from the colonoscopy. So that's kind of a stretch on this example, but the point is that no test is 100% accurate. So trial and error is the best, but if you're looking for some kind of springboard, if you're looking for some kind of motivation, if you're looking for something black and white to shove in your husband's face and be like, look, we got to do this, then the testing is great because, trust me, us husbands are stubborn.
All right. And then I think the next one you said was brain chemistry.
Yeah, let's get into brain chemistry. This is going to be the meat of what we talk about today, because this is the biggest thing that I do with my patients, because this is what gets me the best results. So let me talk for a good 10 minutes about brain chemistry and get into the nitty gritty. And so what I want to show you families is what brain chemistry, or our brain runs on different chemicals. Okay, it runs on serotonin, it runs on dopamine, it runs on adrenaline, and these control the speed of our nervous system. Okay, serotonin is very calming and very relaxing. It helps us sleep. It also slows down our brain so that we can learn different things. This neuron has to connect to this neuron for us to learn different things. That's what happens inside the brain. Some things like dopamine. Dopamine is responsible for focus and for concentration. So for these kids who are lacking focus, maybe they need more dopamine. And then, adrenaline also runs the nervous system. That's more of our fight or flight chemical. If that's off the charts, then you've got behavioral issues and the brain can't slow down. So making sure the chemicals that run the brain are in the appropriate levels, the appropriate range that we need them for good and healthy development. So, and we know this because when we test, and I'll walk everybody through that, we test these brain chemical levels. If something is low, we're going to increase it. If something's high, we're going to bring it down. When we do those treatments, this is where we get a lot of language improvements. So that's why I really like to get into the nitty gritty of this. So I printed out a few pages from some of my educational slides. We've got these educational programs through our website that really help you understand what to do and what tests to order and such. So I printed out a few of these for us to hopefully kind of walk us through. So don't mind me just holding these up to the screen.
Go back just a little bit.
Oh, okay, there we go. Thank you.
Perfect.
So you wanted to get my face in there. So what happens is, again, you are what you eat, even the chemicals in your brain, okay? So it starts with amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. Protein mixes with, oh, excuse me. Oh, Siri wanted to talk to me. Thought I turned Siri off. Your proteins mix with certain B vitamins, specifically methylfolate and B12. Those are the important ones. So your proteins mix with those vitamins, and those vitamins and the proteins combine together to create these chemicals, things like serotonin and dopamine, okay? They do all the fun work in your brain, and then they leave your brain through other genes called COMT and MAO. So COMT and MAO are different genetics that affect the removal of the brain chemistry. So again, we piece together our food, proteins, B vitamins, we get these brain chemicals, they do their work in the brain, and then they leave the brain through these genes, and they become organic acids. So maybe you've heard about organic acids, or you've done an OAT test. OAT is just an acronym for organic acid test, and that can give you some idea of the chemicals in your brain. Now, a lot of people have dabbled into some genetics when it comes to autism, and you've heard of the gene MTHFR, okay, or that mother something gene, as people like to call it. So that gene is also very important, and let me kind of walk you through it, because it controls the production of the brain chemistry through the production of methylfolate. So what's important is you take folate or folic acid. Those turn into folinic acid or leucovorin. Okay, some of you may have had leucovorin as a treatment, or folinic acid as a treatment. Those go through the MTHFR gene to become methylfolate. And then that goes back into that other page of combining with proteins to create the chemicals in our brain. So I want to talk about the chemicals in the brain, the serotonin, the dopamine. I want to talk about these genes because they all go together to make our brain function and to get more language, all right? So what we do in our office is we can test for these chemicals. So let me just show you a couple pages of the testing that we run and piece it all together for you. So here's an example of when brain chemistry goes low. So when brain chemistry goes low, and this is a test, I'm not sure if you can see it.
Yeah, you can see it a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so this is an example of the testing. We'll test dopamine levels, norepinephrine levels, and adrenaline levels. And again, I don't know if you can see it here. This patient, they happen to be low, okay? So you can test these levels. Dopamine levels were low in the brain. Norepinephrine levels were low in the brain. And we step back and say, okay, now these chemicals come from protein and come from genetics, so we need to fix both. So we can test the genetics, and maybe, a lot of people have already done these genetic tests with 23andMe or Ancestry or more complicated, lab tests. You can actually test things like MTHFR and COMT and such. And so this patient had the MTHFR abnormal, okay? So let's just take this one type of case. I'm going to go show two. So this is the first one. This first case has dopamine levels low. So that's low focus, that's low engagement, that's, really lacking in communication and motivation and desire. And these kids tend to be anxious too. Low dopamine causes the lack of focus and anxiety. That pairs with this MTHFR mutation. So what we need to treat, by treating the low dopamine, we're going to treat those proteins and those B vitamins. Okay. So what we use in our office, and as you mentioned before, I've been working with these kids for 17 years. 5 years ago, I decided I couldn't find the supplements on the market that I wanted for these kids, and there was something better. So, I put together this vitamin company originally just for my patients to give them something that I think would be the best. Okay. And a few years ago, we opened this up retail on our website, and now we're on Amazon. And, I formulate these supplements specifically for our kids. So we have a product called Attention on the Double. This is the protein that makes that dopamine. It's going to give you more focus, more concentration. And this is our chewable methylfolate and B12. So this is called B-licious for MTHFR. When we see kids and we test them, they have low dopamine, we're going to give both of these. We're going to give the vitamins, we're going to give the proteins. That goes into the brain, and we're going to boost that dopamine level up.
So what you're saying is that they're low in both those amino acids, the protein and the B vitamins. And by giving them, you're increasing what's going into the brain.
Exactly. So, and this pretty much happens, overnight. You're going to give these proteins and vitamins to these kids, and all of a sudden these brain chemical levels are going to start to develop. It's like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you look in your pantry and you got peanut butter and jelly and bread, you're going to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Same thing happens with our bodies and brains. If you give the correct protein, the correct vitamins, the body knows what to do. It just makes the stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of focusing on that dopamine and then those low levels. And go ahead.
Can I stop you and ask a question? Because I bet people are wondering, when you do the neurotransmitter test,
yes,
and when you do the genetic test,
yes,
what do you need? Are you drawing blood? Are you taking saliva? What do you need for those?
Great question. So it depends on the lab. The ones we use, the brain chemistry is a urine test. And frankly, we use local labs. We use Quest, we use LabCorp, we use local hospitals. You can go there. You can put this testing through your insurance company and get these results, which is awesome. I mean, a urine test is going to be a lot easier than blood. Might as well have insurance pay for something nowadays. As I like to say, we've got insurance, we just don't have coverage. There's plenty it doesn't pay for nowadays. The genetics, again, it depends on the lab. We use a lab that has a cheek swab. So it's a big long Q-tip, and you just swab your child's cheek like you're brushing their teeth, send it off, and you're going to have this genetic SNP analysis.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So sorry I interrupted you on the brain chemistry.
No, that's a great question. People, you got to know the details where the rubber hits the road. And we try to avoid blood testing when possible. Some tests you got to do blood, but, like you mentioned, the food test, it's blood. There's no other way. Mm-hmm. So that's what we try to do. Okay, so again, that's half of these kids. Half of these kids are lacking the stimulation inside their brain. And so we want to supplement that naturally by giving the nutrition the brain needs to do it. Now, on the other side of this, let's talk about the serotonin. So here's another lab test of a patient of mine that I printed out. And what we have here, we've tested their dopamine and norepinephrine like before, okay? As you can see over here, it's got an H next to it because it's high. So this patient's dopamine levels is really high. Up top, there's a test here called 5-HIAA. This is our test for serotonin, okay? So for this patient, their serotonin level was low, but their dopamine level was high. All right. So again, kind of the opposite, where the accelerators, dopamine's an accelerator in the brain, makes you go really fast and spastic. And these kids don't, this patient with the high dopamine didn't sleep. They're bouncing on the couch all day long. They're just
constantly moving.
Constantly moving. I had a patient one time who, when their child was in their womb, named the child Chase because the kid was just moving inside the womb like this. And when he was born, he just kept going. So they named him Chase. And, these aren't Chase's lab results, but you get the idea. There are some people who are just wired to be fast, okay? These are the kids we need to slow down, okay? So we need to increase that serotonin level. So again, going back to the beginning, what is brain chemistry? Brain chemistry is protein plus vitamins, okay? So for him, we are gonna boost those serotonin levels. We put together the supplement called Super Serotonin Support that I use with a lot of my kids. It's probably the third most common supplement we have. And it builds that serotonin level in the brain by giving the protein and the vitamins. This has the B's, this has the proteins and the amino acids in it that are going to build the serotonin levels. So it's a great supplement that we use to help kids sleep, help kids be calm, and help with the language. So I got a couple good case stories we'll talk about at the end. But this is kind of a good description of what do we do to help the brain function better. You've got to understand is your brain running fast? Is your brain running slow? You test for these things. And again, our patients in our office, man, every one of them, we're going to run this brain chemistry test. You pee in a cup, you send it to the lab. And then, if you understand what's going on genetically, you put these two pieces together and you're going to bring balance. And for so many of our kids, that improves language. So it's a huge part of what I do. Again, only 2 of the 4 things we're going to talk about today, but it's one of the biggest parts.
Excellent.
So, all right, let me wrap up with the other 2 things. Sorry, just taking a look at my notes here so I don't forget anything.
No worries.
So the other 2 things I want to briefly talk about is inflammation and detoxification. Inflammation is a big one. And a lot of our kids, and again, because they're all so different, a lot of our kids tend to have a lot of inflammation. So I've had these comments from parents. I gave my kid had a fever, so I gave him some ibuprofen, some Motrin, some Advil. Remember, no Tylenol. If you haven't heard yet, Tylenol's bad. Please don't use it. We gave him some ibuprofen.
You want to say why it is, just for people who don't know?
No, that's great. There has been a lot of new research studies lately that associates Tylenol during a fever contributes to the cause of autism. So it was a wonderful research study that was done 2 years ago from Harvard and Duke that put these pieces together, certain genetics of an infection, a fever, and Tylenol, and all of a sudden, boom, your child regressed. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure a lot of you listening out there, if you had a child who was developing, was starting to talk, was saying mama and dada, and it went away instantly, you probably remember a time they had a mild fever, you gave them some Tylenol, and at that time, gone. Mm-hmm. Gone. And it's sad. And what an easy thing for us to do for the future generations. I mean, CDC just increased our rates to 1 in 54. That's practically 2% of kids with an autism diagnosis. If we can stop this from increasing just by switching from acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, to ibuprofen, that would be huge.
All right. Thank you for that.
No, that's all right. And again, we'll have these research studies on our educational platform through our website because they are essential for you to read, digest, and take as your own. Be like, yeah, this is, and show your pediatrician when they pass this stuff out like candy. You're like, look, here's some real research by, this is Harvard. This isn't, Joe Bubat's university that says this could be a cause. And if there's other options out there, if I can use ibuprofen instead of Tylenol, why not?
Right.
Why not?
All right, we digress from the using ibuprofen with a fever.
Yeah, so that's okay. An important point, but I'm glad you asked. So I've had parents ask me, hey, my kid had a fever and I gave him some Advil or some Motrin or some ibuprofen and they started talking. Or, geez, my child had a cold and I gave him antibiotics and they started talking. Why is this happening? This is happening because of an uncontrolled immune system. So a certain subset of kids have an autoimmune condition where the body's own antibodies, the body's own immune system are attacking the brain. So you can do this type of testing. Again, this testing is blood versus urine, but you can test for antibodies against the brain and see, hey, look, there's an autoimmune attack, okay? This is getting a little bit more advanced, but I just had a patient this week who had an antibody to their acetylcholine receptors. And acetylcholine is the chemical that relaxes the entire nervous system. Okay. And they had an autoimmune attack against it. So imagine your brake lines were cut. That's basically what was happening with this child, an autoimmune disease that cut the brake lines. He just didn't stop. He didn't sleep. It was just bouncing off the walls. I got dents in my sheetrock in my office from it, which is fine. But it's the point that the immune system can be attacking different parts of the brain, causing inflammation, which is preventing language development. So again, we've had kids, hey, I took Advil, I started talking. I took antibiotics and I started talking. Now, I don't want kids to be on long-term Advil because they'll get ulcers, and obviously long-term antibiotics is going to cause C. diff and yeast infections. So we're trying to find a better option, okay, which is why I like natural medicine a lot. So the option that we use is a rarely used supplement called PEA. And PEA is an acronym for palmitoyl ethanolamide. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And this supplement has actually had a lot of scientific research behind it, helping kids on the spectrum. So I printed out one of these research studies that talks about this PEA. What's it say here? Palmitoyl ethanolamide is an adjunctive therapy for autism, and you can read in the abstract. And again, we have these research studies on our educational page. You read through these on how they help with language. This study specifically noted huge improvements in socialization and stimming behaviors just by using an anti-inflammatory supplement of PEA. So kind of hard to get. PEA originated in I think Denmark or the Netherlands, but we imported it here into the States, and we mixed it with a couple other supplements. So PEA is fat soluble, it doesn't dissolve in liquids. So we mixed it with other fat soluble supplements, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, which also have great research together helping kids on the spectrum. So we put it together in something called Panda Bear. Okay, and we named it Panda Bear because some kids with this autoimmune reaction have a diagnosis of PANDAS or PANS, which is an autoimmune attack against the brain. So that's why we named it Panda Bear. You don't need that diagnosis to use it, but it's an amazing anti-inflammatory, decreasing brain inflammation supplement.
And is that PEA that's in there, that's anti-inflammatory, is that a derivative of a vitamin? Is that a natural substance? Like, where does it come from, or how is it normally in the body?
That's a great question. So it is a natural substance. I'm not exactly sure where it's extracted from. It's not technically a vitamin. It's not a protein. It's classified in the cannabinoid section of nutrients because PEA actually activates our cannabinoid receptors in our brain. So if you take CBD, like a lot of kids on the spectrum do, it hits a certain receptor in the brain, these cannabinoid receptors. So this supplement PEA acts like CBD, but it's not CBD. It's not hemp derived.
Right. Okay.
So it's pretty cool in its actions that it can have the effect of CBD and be anti-inflammatory in the brain. So it's really cool. And again,
that's a great find. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's one of my favorite new things. We just developed it last fall. Hold on. We're gonna wrap up with a story. I want to make sure I tell one of my PEA stories as well. Okay, and then last but not least, and thanks for everybody for hanging in there. Detoxification is so important because
absolutely,
man, you read the research studies out there. It obviously associates toxicity with the development of autism. There's more and more toxins everywhere in the world. They get inside the developing brain, and they cause problems. Those toxins will get inside your brain, they'll get inside your mitochondria, and they stop things from working. And one of the ones that I don't like the most is aluminum. I think aluminum is one of the key factors in the causes of regressive autism. And there was a great study, I forget it was, I think it was Chris Exley or Chris Shaw, who did an autopsy analysis. So they did different autopsies, and they looked at, they analyzed the aluminum levels of different brains. And they showed, here's the average person, here's their average aluminum amount. If you take the average aluminum amount and then look at people with Alzheimer's, they have 3.5 times the aluminum amount of a neurotypical person. And then they had somebody with autism who had 17 times the amount of aluminum as an average person. So it's crazy. It's there. We need to get rid of it. So I did some before and after lab testing on one of my patients. So you can see here's an aluminum level. And again, this is a test we use through regular labs, Quest, LabCorp, hospitals. They're going to do this testing. They're going to do it through the urine. It's going to go through your insurance. We tested the aluminum. As you can see, this aluminum was 115, where it's normally supposed to be below 30. Okay. So
well, are we really supposed to have that below 5 to 30 in our blood, or is even that excessive? I'm curious.
Well, no, you're going to get me on another soapbox. Here's the thing about reference ranges, and this is a pet peeve of mine. The reference range from a lab is not created based on research studies of medicine. It's created based on a standard deviation of who comes into the lab. So let me break that down. You've got 1,000 people who walk into the lab, they do the test, and the lab takes their average and says, okay, here's the average level for that, and we're going to cap it here and here. And that is normal. That's how they define normal, who walks into the lab. And if you're 2.5% to the left, you're low, and if you're 2.5% to the right, you're high. But if you're in this 95% of the bell curve, you're normal, because that's who walked in the office.
Well, and they're the sick people who are coming in to get tested, right? Healthy people rarely come in to get tested.
Exactly my point. Who comes into the lab is sick people. So, hey, if you're in the middle of the range, you have the average amount of a sick person. Mm. And that's a problem, because these reference ranges should be defined medically, not by a statistical average. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when it comes to what this should be, you know, I think about my daughter. And if you asked me, how much bleach should my child have in their system? That'd be zero. Okay. You know, how much poison can my kid have? None. No poison on the menu today, please. So when I look at these things that have no health benefit, they're only toxic and poison, my answer is zero. I want zero in here. And that's our goal with detox. We detox until there's nothing left. Mm-hmm. So. Okay.
So you showed us the high, and then you're going to show us the after.
And we did it. We used our detox supplement. Again, this says less than 30. It was a what were they? They were a 115. And we dropped them down in 2 months to an 11.
And then what clinical results did you see? Like, what did you see behavior-wise?
Behavior is more calm, and they have more language. They're using more words. They're not as so reactive. Detoxification also seems to help with a lot of sleep. So we're getting more language, better behavior, and better sleep by getting rid of poisons out of the brain.
And when you get better sleep, you're able to detox better, right? So it's kind of this positive feedback.
Yes. Any parent who's got a kid who doesn't sleep knows the wonders of 10 straight hours. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, I was on a cruise for a week. It was awesome. So let me show you what we did. Again, detoxing aluminum is very, very hard to do. Okay. In fact, if you just left your body to do it on your own, aluminum has a 50-year half-life, 50. So if you live to be 100, you'll get rid of 75% of the aluminum in your body.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's you go to the CDC's website, they've got a 100+ page document on aluminum toxicity. It's a read. So again, aluminum detox is very hard to do. So I formulated a homeopathic that's specifically designed to remove aluminum and mercury from the body. So we call this shot support. We call it shot support because you get aluminum and mercury from your shots. So we put this together, and this is one of the few supplements. Actually, this is the only supplement we have in our arsenal that is FDA approved. Okay, most supplements can't get FDA approval for. Certain homeopathics are. Ours is, and it's great. It's something we like to use in so many of our kids, because detoxification, making sure the immune system isn't ramped up attacking the brain, balancing the brain chemistry, and getting the right foods into your diet. All of these things together are just so awesome in improving your child's language. That's what we do in our office. That's what gives us the most results with most of our kids. So again, this is what I want to just hope I can guide the families and the parents out there that there's hope. Okay. We get our kids to talk in our office. All right. And not all of them, nothing works for everybody. Trust me. But if you haven't tried everything, keep trying.
That's great. And so here's the $1 million question.
Yes.
All right. You talked about 4 things, and we're not going to do all these overnight, even though you can have an overnight shift.
Sure.
What's your length of time for this process? For, I don't know, maybe the long end and the short end and kind of the average. Right. What are you seeing?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think the number one important thing is that you should always be seeing improvements in your child. Okay. Nothing's going to work overnight, and people ask me, how long is this going to take? To get from where you are to 100%, it's probably going to take a couple years. Okay. But you should be seeing improvements on the way. All right. And yes, this is how it goes. He goes, hey, Hey, oh crap. Hey, oh crap. There's going to be bad days, there's going to be good days, but as long as we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, we're heading in the right direction. So I tell everybody, we're going to do different things. We're going to try it for a month. And if you're seeing benefits, great, we'll keep doing it. But if something's not working after a month, maybe two, you've really got to stop and do something different, because the time is ticking. So everything that we implement, whether it be diet, and we try to do one thing at a time, because if you're doing multiple things at once, who knows what's doing what's helping, what's a side effect. As long as you're continually trying new things, and as long as you're honestly observing the changes, every month you should be doing something new. You should be seeing more results. And if you're not, you've got to change what you're doing. Okay.
Mhm.
And again, there's a lot of people on this summit that are awesome and that are helping, but we all do something different. So go see somebody, see what they've got for you. If it's not enough, go see somebody else. You come see me, and hey, I got these benefits, but we plateaued. Go see somebody else. Do everything you can for your kid.
Yeah, and so what's the shortest time that you've seen a recovery or, really great gains, and what's the longest?
Well, let me say, and I would say the longest is for the kids who are not responders. So
Mhm.
we have these kids where, hey, you know what, boy, I got a lot of tools in my toolbox, and I get to the point where I've tried every single one and nothing's worked. And that doesn't happen. That's a rare occasion, but it happens. So for those kids who are non-responders, I often find that they have some kind of genetic issue. So I give an example. We had 4 teenagers in our office over the years, and we tried it all. Didn't work. Nothing worked for them. Okay. They did the diet, they did the supplements, they did hyperbaric, they did stem cells, nothing. Finally, we tested their genetics. Okay. More than this MTHFR and COMT we've been talking about. Tested their genetics, and these 4 kids had Fragile X. All right. They were never tested. Their pediatrician never did it. It never came up on the radar. Hey, they've got Fragile X syndrome, okay, which is causing the autism. It's not a typical regressive autism case. So we do see these kids who have rare genetic disorders. And those are the kids who tend to not respond to our typical biomedical treatment. So that's kind of the long case. The long case is, we've got these teenagers who've been doing stuff for a decade, okay? And boy, not getting where other kids are recovering. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the long end of the stick, and that's where we do very advanced genetic testing. But again, I would say our average for full recovery is probably a few years. But let me give you some cool stories about fast changes, which I always like. I need the Weight Watchers, lingo down here. Don't expect to lose 100 pounds in 5 hours. But these are some fun stories I have. I was lecturing at a TACA conference a couple years ago, and a lady came up to me, and she had a girl, this was a Friday. She came up to me on Friday. She said, "Oh, I've got a little girl. She's 8, and she doesn't talk much, a few words here and there, and blah blah blah." And I said, "Well, you know what? I think your child has a low dopamine issue." So I was at the conference, and I had one of these bottles here, this Attention on the Double, and I said, "Try that." So I gave that to her on Friday. And then on Sunday, 2 days later, she came back up to me, and she kind of walked up to me, and she stopped, and her eyes welled up, and I'm like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? And she came up to me, and she said, today's my birthday. And I've been giving that vitamin to my daughter for the past 2-3 days. And I was coming here to the conference today, and I was saying goodbye to her, and she grabbed my face, and she said, "Happy birthday, Mom."
Mm.
This is a child who barely had any words. So in a couple days, we were able to get that language just out of her. It's already in here. It's already in the brain. It's ready to launch. I'll give you another story. We had a child, and again, I talked to the parents about what was going on. I said, it sounds like a lot of inflammation, and we gave them that Panda Bear supplement. And again, same thing. 1 week on the supplement, and the words just started pouring out.
Mm.
So it's, when you find the right thing, it's amazing. It's amazing. And one last story. This is somebody I've been working with recently. 10-year-old kid on the spectrum, nonverbal. He has epilepsy. He has 30 seizures a day on the maximum dose of seizure med. Okay,
Wow.
30 seizures a day is a lot, but when you've medicated it at the max and still have those seizures, that's crazy. So we were giving him these B vitamins that are activated. And all of a sudden, we found the right dose, and those 30 seizures went to 0. And when we
Wow.
found that right dose of the correct B vitamins, he not only stopped his seizures, but he also started saying words. Okay. And again, not a lot of words overnight, but to go from zero to something is huge for family.
And to zero seizures too. That's a huge accomplishment.
Seriously. And this is where I really feel conventional medicine needs help. Okay. You've got a kid on the max dose of a seizure med, and the neurologist probably just wrote him off, be like, this, what else am I going to do? Here's my med and I've done the most, adios. And, the medical system has failed a lot of our families, not everybody. But, if you feel failed by your pediatrician or by the medical establishment, there's other answers out there. And that's why you've got to find somebody that you trust and you work well with, because what a great example. We gave one vitamin to a kid and the seizures went from 30 to 0, and he started to have some words. And
Yeah.
that's awesome. There is
Yeah,
no other word for it but
absolutely.
awesome.
Absolutely. And so speaking of working with families, how do you work? Do you do telemedicine? Can people get a hold of you? Are you accepting new patients? That kind of thing.
Always, we want to do as much as possible to help families and help kids. And, this is my life and this is what I do. And I try to be as good as possible at it. So we've basically got 3 different parts of our, of what we do to help. And it starts with our clinic, and I'm primarily telemedicine. I'm physically in Connecticut, halfway between New York City and Boston, but 80% of my day I'm on Zoom, I'm on Skype, I'm on the phone. I talk to people literally around the world, and we walk them through lab testing, treatments, what do we do next? Here's some problems up and down. So, helping families as through our clinic is a big part. We obviously have our supplement line as well. So we've got the vitamins that, we feel really work. And this is stuff that I formulated because this works for me. And then we're now in the establishment of our new educational platform. So we're going to be having some online courses that, really help parents understand different things, different medical parts of what's going on. And also the last thing that we do that a lot of people know me through, is our Facebook Lives. So for the past 2 years, every Thursday, I'm on Facebook for an hour, picking a topic, answering live questions. And it's a great way for parents to learn something new on a regular basis and ask some questions live to a doc. So it's a lot of fun. And everything there can be through our main website, spectrumawakening.com.
Great. Yeah, I've seen your Facebook Lives. They're awesome. And you're pretty funny too. So it's entertaining as well.
Yes, I might have been a stand-up comedian before med school. That funny bone is quite large in me.
That's great. And so one question is, if someone wanted to work with you telemedicine, do they need to have their first visit with you in person, or I don't know what the laws are. So
No, we can just do, we can do telemedicine. I don't want anything to inhibit a family getting help. So no, first visit doesn't have to be in person.
Oh, that's great to know. Awesome. And you do have a gift for our listeners. Do you want to tell them about it?
Yes. So we are going to be developing a new ebook on speech development, specifically for your listeners to your summit. And we'll be giving them a 50% coupon of our autism education course, which is going to be great. It's going to go through the nitty gritty of symptoms and lab testing and interpretation and treatments, and really give people some answers. That's why you're here at this summit. You need help, and we're here to help.
Yeah, and that's a great thing, because I feel like I find when parents understand what this supplement's for or why they're doing this and what's behind it, then there's not just so much more hope. But not only that, but when you have that understanding, they can really kind of regulate what they're doing for their kids rather than having to rely on somebody. And relying on somebody is great because we all need support, but to have that knowledge is such power and so empowering for parents. So I'm glad you're doing that. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And then people can get the gifts by just clicking the link below. So we made it really easy, and it'll take you to your website and get all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for I love the way you've encapsulated it and brought it down easy to understand way, and shared with our parents how their kids can get speech. And thank you for doing what you do in the world. We need people like you.
Well, we're all here together. Everybody on this summit, we're all here to help. And I just want to make sure parents are going to get the help somewhere, because the thing that makes me the saddest is when a family does nothing. They hear their pediatrician say, just put them in a home and forget about them. Man, no, it's your kid.
Yeah.
I've got kids, you've got kids. We do anything for them. And so
Absolutely.
we're all here together.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for listening in and getting all the nuggets you got today.